time we give back. Sow a seed and show someone where love's at. Even if you don't give a dime, give your heart and share your time. Help somebody else in life. Give back. Let's give back.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Ignite, Empower, Transform. My name is Hosea James Gavan II, and I am your host. Today we have a very special guest, one of my favorite people, a brother who was my mentor as a student at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, Reverend Les Carter. Reverend Les Carter has gone on to do some amazing things, among them helping to create the Martin Luther King Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Here we go. Okay, Reverend Carter, thank you for joining us.
Yes, sir.
I want to start out, brother, by first thanking you, man, for the impact that you've had on my life. And as a freshman at Drake University, you saw something in me that I may not have really understood at the time, but you put me on you made me a board of director of the Wesley Foundation as a freshman, which I found was such a great honor as a freshman. But I recently reminded you of that. But I just want to, in this open public setting, I just want to acknowledge that. I really appreciate that, man.
I'm glad I could help. But you were ready. You were ready to go. And coming out of student movement at Simpson College, like I did, for you to even volunteer was like amazing. You jumped right in there. And the Wesley Foundation that's where my office was.
Right.
And I was the campus minister, and then they made me the Black student advisor, and it went from there. But
right.
Working with students was always my calling, and whether they were in college or incarcerated.
Right. So going back to your impact. So let me explain one significant experience that really helped shape my whole attitude about social action, getting involved with creating change. As you know, my second semester of my freshman year, you took a delegation of Drake University students down to St. Louis because there was a teacher's strike in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And you took a delegation of students down to Drake. I was, again, honored to be a part of that, where I actually had the opportunity to stay with your mentor, Dr. Bernard Lafayette. I stayed in his home while I was there. But while we were there, we were under your direction, under Dr. Bernard's direction, and Jesse Jackson was also a part of that whole trying to resolve that teacher strike. And we were interacting, providing support to the students, right?
Mm-hmm.
They became, based on the strategy that you and Dr. Bernard introduced to them, the third, am I saying it right? The third force strategy?
Yeah.
Can you share with the audience about that experience? It had a profound effect on me, but it was my introduction on how to really have social impact and create change.
Well, it was an opportunity for us to have a laboratory to help understand how you bring about social change. And we were talking with students at Drake about their experience. I think we may have had one or two who actually were from St. Louis, about their experience and the concern about what was happening with minority teachers in St. Louis, and the fact that the St. Louis legislature the Missouri legislature had prohibited teachers from going on strike, and they had penalties for that, like you could lose your job. And so the minority, Black, primary African American teachers, they went on strike. They just said, it's not working. We don't have the resources. We don't have the same salary base that other black teachers have, white teachers primarily. And they had been promised a lot of things. We're at Drake talking about what can we do? That's what we can do is go down there and see what we can do. We don't need a strategy, but we need to understand the dynamics. You have the state legislature involved, you have the governor involved, you have the mayor involved, you have the teachers union, two of them. One was for the majority teachers, the other was the black base teachers union, and they were on strike. And the kids were out of school. And so our concern, our interest, or focus was to see what we could do to help those students that were about to graduate from high school, primarily minority in St. Louis in certain areas, and give them an opportunity to participate in their own change process. Understand you don't have to just sit at home. You can get out and make a difference and promote your cause. You want to graduate and you deserve to graduate. So that's how we went to the administration at Drake and talked about we'd like to take some students down to have a hands-on. We have all the safeguards in place. We have people down in St. Louis who are prepared to receive the students. And we asked the administration to waiver your classes so you don't get penalized for being out of class for a couple of weeks. Drake University gave us a couple of vans. We had housing for those who needed housing, and the information we had, the pre-survey information we had was at least 3 or 4 African American students down there were presidents of their classes.
Right.
In their 12, senior class.
Charlotte Shaw was one.
I think Jawan Butler was another.
And Jawan Buckner was another.
So we got in, once we got to understand we're there to support the students. We're not there to take sides. We're there to say education is important, and we want to make sure that these young people have the same opportunities that most of us had, and that's to graduate on time and to have the opportunity to go on to higher education. So make a long story short, one of the first things we did was to, we didn't call a press conference. I think we went to the library. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that.
And we talked to the library staff and said, we'd like to have students who want to learn and feel that that's important for their future to be able to come to the library and study since the schools are closed down.
Right.
And they said, okay, that makes sense. I said, well, let me make sure that they'll come in with books, they'll come in with assignments, and they'll probably be there for 2 or 3 hours, and we may have 10 or we may have more than that. And they said, fine. What happened though was we were told that the library was going to close earlier than we were anticipated, and we decided to stay at the library.
Okay.
And the ones who didn't want to stay,
right,
the set-in at the library, who didn't want to stay, they of course could leave, but we asked them to be on the outside because we always had a contingency plan, and we talked about this before we went and did this kind of set-in at the library. So we have to have people on the outside to have access to resources, like a lawyer, for example, just in case we got arrested.
Right. Right.
And Lafayette, Dr. Lafayette, he stayed on the outside because we always had a contingency plan, a backup plan. And it worked out to the extent the police came and they kind of chuckled. I think they empathized with our cause because they didn't arrest us.
Right.
And finally, I think the director of the library services showed up. I think a couple press people showed up, and the decision was to let the students stay.
Right.
That made an impact because it then became public information.
Right.
These students really wanted to learn, and that they felt they didn't want to take sides. They didn't want to get between the fight between the two teachers unions. They didn't want to get into a political fight with mayor and others. But this was their way to demonstrate that learning is a priority for them. the Drake students, they came in, and I was really proud of how we managed to handle that situation. And Reverend Jackson came down a little later in the week, and he met with the governor, he met with the mayor, chief of police, and that then became
and he met with us as well.
yeah, he met with you guys, yeah, and that became kind of like he kind of shined the light on the problem,
right?
And he kind of energized the discussions taking place at the unions, between the unions and the state officials to resolve this issue. When we left, they were at the negotiating table. And when we left, the mayor was involved in facilitating that negotiation. So was the superintendent of the school district. The students, leaders that we impacted, I think 5 or 6 of them ended up coming to Drake.
There were 2 students, 2 leaders.
And Drake was ready to receive them because of what you all did.
Yeah.
Because remember, Drake didn't have a lot of African American students, and here, right in their own backyard, here's Iowa, and here's Missouri. They hadn't really made a concerted effort to recruit students from St. Louis. So it was a win-win for everybody.
Right.
And what we were trying to illustrate is it's the top-down, bottom-up philosophy of social change.
Right.
So you just can't attack the people at the top, they do name calling and denigrate them. You have to figure out a way to bring them into the process. And at the same time, you have to bring the so-called victims into the process. And how do you create a level playing field where there's conversation going on, not based on your status, your age, your degree, but based on your concern that all young people, all children, kids deserve to learn, to get an education. And that became the focus that everybody rallied behind. And that a few months later, they actually resolved the strike, and the teachers came to some equitable agreement about salaries and about longevity in terms of promotions and so forth. So that's where I guess
that was my official start. And
that was where you started.
And I appreciate that. We're gonna take a quick public service announcement break, and then we'll be right back.
I already knew that I was gonna go to college, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science, become the mayor or something, make the situation better for other people. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend.
Welcome back to this segment of Ignite, Empower, Transform. We are here with Reverend Les Carter, one of my mentors in life, certainly one of my inspirations. Thank you for that, for sharing in our first segment, Les. You really you brought me back, man. Some of those memories, man, that I cherish, that I absolutely cherish. So coming back to Drake, we were on fire, man. We were really like, oh wow, we got involved with something special, and we knew that we were a part of the solution, right? And we were, as you mentioned, many of those students wound up coming to Drake, but we were also providing social emotional support to those students. We actually became friends with some of those students because we were able to help to encourage them during this challenging time. Coming back to Drake, things started to move very quickly. As I mentioned, Dr. Bernard Lafayette, who was one of the lieutenants, and I'd ask you to speak about Dr. Lafayette in more detail. He and yourself helped to create the National Black Student Leadership Consultation, which turned out to be another major event my sophomore year, and you catapulted from there because we lost you. We lost you as a result. Indirectly, they recognized your leadership and your ability to kind of organize and make things happen. You want to talk about that?
Yes. So the Dr. Lafayette was a part of the National Campus Ministry Association at the time. And I was just starting at the Wesley House, and the Wesley Foundation provided me housing. And Harold, I think, can't remember Harold's last name, he was the director. He mentioned Dr. Lafayette is the person I needed to meet. And he's went to a national convention and told Dr. Lafayette about what we were doing at Drake. And Dr. Lafayette became very interested, and we talked on the phone several times. And then he came and actually made a visit. And from there, I called him up and said, hey, we'll be in St. Louis, and he lived in St. Louis at that time.
So who is Dr. Lafayette?
Dr. Lafayette is I guess his contribution to the civil rights struggle started with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He and John Lewis, part of that movement of students. They were students at that time. And the Student Nonviolent, SNCC, became the driving force for the set-in movements and also for the bus rides in terms of demonstrating that social action, social change, you have to put you sometimes yourself on the line. So when Dr. Lafayette found out what we were doing at Drake, and we told him about our interest in what was going on in St. Louis, he kind of laid the foundation. And that's where he and I became kind of hand in glove. You know, he was giving me direction.
Yeah.
And from that point on, he meant that we became not only close, but we became, like you said, he was my mentor, and he always told me, I'm your mentor, but you know, at some point you have to be your own mentor.
Right.
So 30 years later, that probably happened. So you see Dr. Lafayette, John Lewis standing, you know, at a bus station. They were the original Freedom Riders on the bus, just the two of them. And so it kind of demonstrated to me, sometimes big things happen out of small sacrifices.
Correct.
And those two gentlemen, I'm sure that other SNCC individuals were concerned about them going down south by themselves.
Right.
But they took that risk, and that became then the beginning of a student movement. And so out of that grew us going down to St. Louis, and he was very elated. He was kind of surprised that we even would consider spending that time and doing what we did, and he was 100% behind it. And from that point on, as you said, you guys lost me because he swept me up into other ventures, including going up to Chicago, working for Reverend Jackson with him. He was his vice president, then down to Atlanta working with Miss King. He was her advisor. Going to DC, and then eventually
Slow down. You can't listen to some important pieces here that I think people need to be aware of in terms of your involvement with starting with your involvement in Chicago with Jesse Jackson. And I want to really address specifically your role as it related to the Martin Luther King Center in Atlanta.
Okay. When I first met Reverend Jackson, he had called Dr. Lafayette and said, I want to go to Iowa, and I want this, I'm not going to officially run for president, but I want to create a Black agenda for all the candidates who are running for president. Jimmy Carter was a candidate at that time. And he came down, he called and asked me if I would help organize in Des Moines a campaign to go to Black churches and so forth, and to create interest in being a part of the Iowa Caucus convention. So I said yes. I said, Reverend, there's an issue that some of the ministers have told me about, is that they've invited you a number of times, but you for whatever reason you had to cancel. So I need you to send somebody down that could go around with me as I talk to the clergy, because I think they'd be very supportive. Turned out they were, and it turned out that Reverend Jackson did go to the Iowa caucus, and he did negotiate with President Carter some of his agenda items to help the Black community on a national level. I even got a call from President Carter to ask me to swing my forces to his side.
You got a call? Oh, wow, I never knew that. Wow.
Yeah, he and I, when I went to D.C., I did get a chance to follow up with him.
I never knew that. Wow.
Yeah, so Reverend Jackson became kind of a person that I admired, and he was a dynamic, not just speaker. He was a very anointed brother.
Pure energy.
Yeah, he was very anointed. Anything he heard you say, and particularly when you went into statistics and charts and graphs, he could memorize 90% of what you showed him and said to him. And I thought that was just amazing, but he was an anointed brother. From there, I went up to Chicago to work with him on an expansion of the Push Excel program. And at that time, they were expanding to Buffalo, New Orleans, and what was the other city? I had 3 cities that he asked me to go in and help organize. And I worked with him for about a year and a half, going to those cities and setting up offices and going into the community to explain what the Excel program was all about in terms of helping children and kids excel in school. And from there, I went back to Des Moines and said, thank you. Jackson said, would you get on the road and go with me? And I said, well, I got 2 little babies at home. I got to stay at home. From there, I went to Washington, D.C., because Bedard Lafayette had a new consultant job with the United States Academy Commission on the study of the institution or the Institution for Peace.
Wow.
So that's
let's take another pause,
okay.
And we'll be right back.
I see the future is really bright for me. The high school diploma is just added to the confidence, and now I feel unstoppable.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back to this final segment of Ignite, Empower, Transform. We are here with Reverend Les Carter. He has shared with us some amazing stories, his incredible experiences, and we're about to discuss one of the, I guess, most fascinating parts of his life, where he helped to create the King Center down in Atlanta. Les, you want to kind of help us?
Yeah, well, let me try to segue from my work with Mrs. King. Before we had the holiday bill, I was part of the advance team that went around the country to get not only people to sign petitions, but we had hearings about how we could deal with police brutality and so forth. And that was my project for her. And 9 years later, I left her the King Center as director of the programs for the King Center. I went to Washington. I went to New York for an interview, and there was Dr. Harry Belafonte was part of the interview team. The couple of people from the legislature were on the team. Anyway, I was asked, would I be interested in working with the New York State Martin Luther King Jr. Institute that had just been passed legislation, and they had an appropriation. And I said, well, I just left the King Center and got kids in school down in Atlanta. They said, well, you can come up and leave. I said, well, I can't come up without my wife. We'll hire both of you. So my wife and I came up to Albany, New York, and that became the second phase of working with the Dr. King's ideas. And we set up training of trainers programs. We trained a lot of police departments in New York. We went into schools in Brooklyn and other places to deal with situations that were going on in the community. We had an advanced team. Dr. Lafayette was part of the advanced team that was called by the governor to go to hot spots. And that's so was what Reverend Al Sharpton. But the Institute had a formal position and team that would go in and do the analysis and try to come up with solutions as how we could deal with the conflicts that were going on. That was
We reconnected again because I was in the Army at that time as well as executive director of the caucus. So
I didn't even know you were there until got in the elevator, and I'm looking at you and saying, Hosea, what are you doing?
exactly.
All that time from Drake now to
Exactly.
Albany. And we did well, and I'm just, the Institute is still legally a part of state government. It's just it's not funded because Governor Pataki defunded it, and because I probably would have stayed there for a little while longer. But it was being in the presence of Harry Belafonte and others, I was just so humbled, and I really felt blessed because all my career has been of service, and here I'm among these individuals who.
Well, not just you served, you worked with Coretta Scott King for 9 years. You've been for the majority of your life a close confidant of Dr. Bernard Lafayette. I mean, you've had some really Reverend Jesse Jackson. I mean, you've had some really profound relationships in terms.
And John Lewis and I worked together at the King Center a couple summers when he was the director of the Scholars Internship Program, and he and I worked right next to each other for a couple, year and a half, and then he wanted me to go pursue his political interests, and of course I had to stay with the students.
Right. Well, who knows? You could be Congressman Carter now.
Well, but that's not, again, I could have been a lot of things.
Right.
I could have been a professor at Syracuse University. I could have been a scholar in Bible, but that wasn't what my calling was about. And I wouldn't change anything. I just have been on a joyful ride, and the experience, particularly when I got to New York and ended up working in corrections, state corrections, and they asked me to be the coordinator for the reentry program, and I took the job with the provision that I would train staff first before we talked about dealing with inmates. And I spent 8 years training counselors and other clergy chaplains, and we put together train-the-trainer programs. I had an office over at this training academy. Wow. and a program office. That was, to me, it was an amazing thing for a kid from Des Moines, Iowa, being called into the commissioner's office, and he set me down and says, hold on, let me get my son on the phone. I need you to talk to him.
But I just want to, again, thank you, not only for what you've done for me, but what you've done for so many people. You're quite a man. You're quite a man.
You are too, man. Keep up the good work. Glad that we touch bases, and
we'll come back to you for our next episode.
Okay.
All right, brother. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Ignite, Empower, Transform. My name is Hosea James Gavan II, and remember, if it's in your heart, do your part. Today's help equals tomorrow's hope. I love our youth. Power to the people.